but it extends beyond just what we expected. Typically, I don't film these actually live. I don't do the live streams on this channel, but this news is so big. That's what we're doing. This streaming setup that I use here for my Tim Pool YouTube channel is not set up for live streaming, but we have to do it. Normally, I do 10 a.m., 1 p.m. on my other channel, but this news is so huge, and there's so much here. We've got to break it down, and this is one of the biggest stories of our generation. One of the biggest stories of the past 2 generations. Roe v. Wade has been overturned by the Supreme Court. We knew this was coming, but it extends beyond just what we expected. First, let me say, a bold move, overturning Roe v. Wade on a Friday morning. Churches have been warned about the night of rage. Over 20 pro-life targets have been vandalized. Pregnancy centers, which just provide resources for expecting mothers, have been firebombed. And now we have threats and more fear of terror. The worst possible day to release this ruling would be on a Friday. And a Friday is atypical for the Supreme Court. In the majority, Justice Alito basically laid it down. There is no constitutional guarantee of a right to abortion. It goes back to the states. The big news right now, as far as I understand, having read the concurrence from Clarence Thomas, and with statements, I've reached out to some lawyer friends. Clarence Thomas is outright saying it is incumbent upon the court to review other court cases, notably Oberfell, to correct those errors. That is basically saying next in line will be the overturning of gay marriage. Not that it will happen. Not that this ruling will do that, but that they should. I'm hearing that other networks and outlets are saying they will not be overturning gay marriage. That's not the case, but I think that's just an attempt at toning things down. Clarence Thomas basically said these were decided in error and they must be corrected. Now, he does say, as does Alito, this will not impact anything outside of abortion. But the argument made here and presented forward by the Supreme Court basically says married couples' rights to contraception, the right to privacy in adult activities, and gay marriage were decided in error. I can actually read this stuff for you. We've got protests erupting already in front of the Supreme Court, fear of widespread rioting and vandalism and acts of terror throughout this weekend. We have the breaking news from Timcast.com. My friends, if you haven't already, head over to Timcast.com, become a member. Please help support our work. And I'll tell you why. We got journalists working 24/7 to get these stories out and make sure they are as true and correct as possible. As a member, you get access to exclusive segments from the Timcast IRL podcast. We're going to have that live show up at 8 p.m. Normally, I don't do these segments live, but this is historical. This is one of the most important days of our lives in terms of politics. This will go down in history. This date will be a major turning point. And I don't just mean for abortion. I'm also talking about the political conflict in this country and what this could mean for it moving forward. So we got a lot to talk about, hence doing this live. Go to timcast.com, become a member, support our work. We're working on documentaries about gun control, the Federal Reserve. These are in preliminary stages, and they're very expensive. So the more of you who do sign up to support our work, the more capable we will be in producing and expanding more. Smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel. Hopefully this stream is working, and I don't know if it is, because I've never done a live stream with this rig right now, but I just had to go for it. Here's the breaking news. Many of you have already seen, but let's go through this and let's go through some of the the more pressing statements made in this opinion from Timcast.com. The Supreme Court has voted to overturn 1973's Roe v. Wade, handing abortion laws back to the states. The 79-page opinion was written by Justice Samuel Alito with a separate concurring opinion by Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Alito wrote that the Roe court usurped the power to address a question of profound moral and social importance that the Constitution unequivocally leaves for the people. Roe was egregiously wrong from the start, Justice Samuel Alito wrote. Its reasoning was exceptionally weak, and the decision has had damaging consequences. And far from bringing about a national settlement of the abortion issue, Roe and Casey have inflamed debate and deepened division. It is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives, the ruling stated. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote that it is time to reiterate his view that the Due Process Clause does not protect a right to an abortion. In their dissent, liberal Justices Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, and Stephen Breyer wrote, with sorrow for this court, but more, for the many millions of American women who have today lost a fundamental constitutional protection, we dissent. From Roe to sorrow, it is truly sad. Whatever the exact scope of the coming laws, the dissenters write, one result of today's decision is certain: the curtailment of women's rights and of their status as free and equal citizens. Chief Justice John Roberts did not join the majority. It did not, surprisingly. In a concurrent opinion, he wrote that he would not have overturned Roe. Instead, only upholding Mississippi's law banning abortion after 15 weeks. In Dobbs v. Jackson, Women's Health Organization, the Supreme Court was hearing Mississippi's appeal of a lower court ruling that found the state's 2018 law banning abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy was unconstitutional. The law, HB 1510, the Gestational Age Act, banned abortion after 15 weeks except in cases of medical emergencies or severe fetal abnormalities. There were no exceptions for cases in rape or incest. The day Mississippi's law went into effect, Jackson's Women's Health Organization, which provided abortions through 16 weeks, filed a lawsuit, along with one of their donors, Sasheen Carr Ellis. The lawsuit named State Health Officer Thomas E. Dobbs from the Mississippi State Department of Health and Kenneth Cleveland, Executive Director of Mississippi State Board of Medical Licensure. The abortion provider won in lower courts, and injunctions were issued to bar the law from being enforced based on the decision in 1992's Planned Parenthood v. Casey. Casey struck down the trimester limitations from Roe and instead prohibited states from banning abortion prior to fetal viability, which is typically considered around 24 weeks into pregnancy. Mississippi went on to appeal to the Supreme Court and asked them to overturn both Roe and Casey. Oral arguments took place in December of 2021. Now let's talk about where this gets particularly interesting. In the arguments, I believe it was Clarence Thomas who asked the petitioner, where does it, or asked the pro-abortion side, where in the Constitution does it say you have a right to abortion? And the response was the 14th Amendment, equal access under the law. Clarence Thomas said, look, when I look at the Constitution, I see the Second Amendment. It says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Doesn't say abortion. Brett Kavanaugh came in and said, why is this not an issue for legislators, for Congress? And you know what? I think they're right. This is tough. This really is. I think there needs to be some degree of privacy. Most of you know that I lean more towards the traditional pro-choice, which really doesn't exist in modern politics. And that is pre-viability. The baby can't survive on its own. There's a question of the woman's right to privacy. There are important questions pertaining to when life begins and when life is protected. It would seem that the Supreme Court's view right now is you have a right to life and liberty, and just because you're not born, you are still alive, that life must be protected. The left takes an approach that, in my opinion, I just don't understand. You know, look, I understand there's a difficult moral question around choice, pro-life, etc., but I do not understand the argument that life begins after birth. That makes no sense. My perspective comes down to a procedural, to authority, the rights of what the state can and can't do. So the Supreme Court has basically said they're not prescribing any morality on abortion. They're simply saying it's not in the Constitution. But this is where things get interesting. I got to say, many on the left were 100% correct. They said, if Donald Trump wins, Roe v. Wade's gone. Many of us, I mean, even me, I was like, oh, come on. They said, if Brett Kavanaugh is confirmed, Roe v. Wade is gone. And I'm like, come on. I didn't believe it. I really, really, truly did not believe it. I did not believe that Brett Kavanaugh, that any of these people would have the spine to stand up and say no to this. I mean, look at the Bruin ruling. This is the gun control issue. Brett Kavanaugh came out and said, no, the Supreme Court says that, he says the Constitution does allow you to require permitting. And I'm like, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Infringe is defined as curtailed, undermined, or limited. Telling a person they need permission from the government to get a weapon sounds like an infringement to me, but that was Kavanaugh. I didn't think the ruling would come down today, and it did. But the left was right when they said this was on the line. The next thing they said was Oberfell is next. This is the Supreme Court ruling that guaranteed nationwide the right to gay marriage. I also didn't believe it, but here we are. Now, this one, I think, is starting to step a bit too far in terms of cultural issues. But if we're dealing with questions of law, then I'm sorry, I just don't know. Look, for a lot of people, we feel that, former liberal, former Democrats, post-liberal, if you're going to allow a man and a woman to form a union, to have certain tax rights and benefits, that should be extended to all people. There are serious questions about the slippery slope. My view on this has evolved quite a bit in my understanding of moral philosophy in legal jurisprudence. Let me break that down. First, let me explain. Over on Twitter, I said, let me just add another holy... And I posted this statement from Clarence Thomas in concurrence. Let me actually just read for you what he wrote. And this one is huge. Clarence Thomas, concurring, writes, the court today declines to disturb substantive due process jurisprudence generally, or the doctrine's application in other specific contexts. Cases like Griswold v. Connecticut, the right of a married persons to obtain contraceptives, Lawrence v. Texas, the right to engage in private consensual acts, and Oberfell v. Hodges, the right to same-sex marriage, are not at issue. The court. So let me just stress. He says the cases like Griswold, Connecticut, Lawrence, they are not at issue. The court's abortion cases are unique. See ante at 31, 32, 66, 71, blah, blah, blah. And no party has asked us to decide whether our entire 14th Amendment jurisprudence must be preserved or revised. Thus, I agree that nothing in the court's opinion should be understood to cast doubt on precedents that do not concern abortion. Okay, nothing in the court's opinion. He goes on to say, for that reason, in future cases, we should reconsider all of this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Oberfell, because any substantive due process decision is demonstrably erroneous. We have a duty to correct the error established in those precedents. After overruling these demonstrably erroneous decisions, the question would remain whether other constitutional provisions guarantee the myriad rights that our substantive due process cases have generated. For example, we could consider whether any of the rights announced in the court's substantive due process cases are privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States protected by the 14th Amendment. He goes on to say, to answer that question, we would need to decide important antecedent questions, including whether the privileges or immunities clause protects any rights that are not enumerated in the Constitution, and if so, how to identify these rights. That said, even if the clause does protect unenumerated rights, the court conclusively demonstrates that abortion is not one of them under any plausible interpretive approach. Moreover, apart from being a demonstrably incorrect reading of the due process clause, the legal fiction of substantive due process is particularly dangerous. At least three dangers favor jettisoning the doctrine entirely. So wow, he is saying outright, this opinion does not address Griswold, Lawrence, and Oberfell. In the future, we should, because they're in error and should be overturned. Now, reading complex legalese and statements, not my expertise. I called a lawyer. I said, tell me I'm wrong about this. Because we're hearing reports. Fox News is saying, no, it doesn't cast doubt. Yes. Let me stress. There's kind of a two-handed approach happening here. It would seem that Thomas is saying this case should not cast doubt on those rulings. However, we should reassess those rulings because they are in error. It sounds like what he's saying is he's trying to have it both ways. That this ruling, no, this ruling's on abortion. No one's asked us to opine on those, but I'm going to do it anyway. I don't know if we'll actually get to that point. So I talked to the lawyer buddy. He said it's certainly fragile. but it doesn't mean that's actually going to happen. It's just that on these grounds, as it pertains to Roe v. Wade, there's questions about these other rulings. To put it simply, the Constitution, if they don't guarantee it, you can't say it's a right. I find that particularly interesting, and it makes sense. It should go to legislators and not to the Supreme Court to just decide that something makes sense, therefore it is. But there are very serious questions then. For a long time, the Supreme Court has legislated from the bench on many issues. And it is worrying. But many of these issues, I think, are good things. I mean, you look at interracial marriage. The idea that you could ban that, to me, is insane. These miscegenation laws, you couldn't even cohabitate with someone of a different race. Where would we be as a country if that remained? So, is that up to question now? I mean, that falls under due process, doesn't it? There's nothing in the Constitution that says this, that you have a right to marry someone of a different race. But are we going to see that cast doubt? I am not okay with that. I'm also not okay with these questions being raised. Or I don't know, man. As a legal issue, there are very important questions that need to be answered. But let me tell you this. When I mentioned before that I have evolved substantially in the past several years on the question of moral jurisprudence and the courts, I've come to realize that there's no such thing as set law. What I mean is, Seamus Coughlin of Freedom Tunes. We have him on Timcast IRL. You're probably a fan. You've probably seen him. He's much more conservative than I. He's very Catholic. He's very pro-life. And he said, the left has proven the slippery slope fallacy is a fallacy because it's actually a cliff. You go off and you go straight to the bottom. He's not wrong. The issue is there is no position by which you stand and say, this is the moral line. When we said and we decided that there is a constitutional right to marry who you love, regardless of the law, many people said, well, that means this, that, or otherwise. And we said, no, this is our line. We agree on this, but not that. When Obergefell was being decided, many people on the right said, this is a slippery slope. What's next? Kids in school, they're going to be taught about this stuff? Okay, maybe. But the left said that's not the case. My attitude was no. There's a big difference between saying someone can get married to someone they love and schools should be teaching about it. But the reality is it's not digital, it's analog. It is not a point-by-point progression. It is a slope and a wave. What that means is it's not a slippery slope. It's progression and advancement and development. When you do have a ruling like Obergefell that guarantees gay marriage, then you invariably get parents saying, my kids need to learn about this, don't they? Shouldn't schools be teaching about Obergefell and these changes? And thus, yes, in schools, they do begin teaching about that stuff. Now, for me, I don't have an issue with that. I have an issue with kids in sex ed when they're not ready and parents don't have a right to, don't have access or being denied their right to consent to these kids' access to sex ed and things like that. But what then happens is someone says, okay, if you're saying I have a right to marry whoever I love, what about siblings? And it's actually now there. The issue is it's not a slippery slope, it's degrees. And when you say one thing is okay, then someone else will then entertain. If your argument is such, then your principle dictates incest would be allowed as well. Morally and principally, that would make sense, wouldn't it? But not really. Like, we're not okay with that. In fact, we want exceptions in the abortion rulings based on those issues. So I've come to realize that I don't care for the idea of a slippery slope. I acknowledge it as a fact no matter what you do, no matter what. So if you say gay marriage is okay, you will get arguments in the next degree. But just because those arguments exist doesn't mean we allow them to move beyond our moral acceptance. So while I would personally say, yeah, you can make those arguments, but no, we do have a hard line. We do recognize that's where we said enough. We get it. Two people love each other and shouldn't be denied based on gender or whatever. But now you're talking about siblings. Now you're talking about a dad and his daughter. Sorry, you're crossing a moral line. If we don't stand and defend moral lines, they erode and they cease to exist. We've got a statement from Barack Obama, who is encouraging more protests. From Timcast.com, former President Barack Obama issues statement condemning overturning of Roe, calls for people to protest. Tweeting, today, the Supreme Court not only reversed nearly 50 years of precedent, It relegated the most intensely personal decision someone can make to the whims of politicians and ideologues, attacking the essential freedoms of millions of Americans. Across the country, states have already passed bills restricting choice. I like how they call it choice. If you're looking for ways to respond, he says PPFA, USO Women, and many other groups have been sounding the alarm on this issue for years and will continue to be on the front lines of this fight. Join with activists who have been sounding the alarm on abortion access for years and act. Stand with them at local protests. At a local protest, volunteer with one of their organizations, knock on doors for a candidate you believe in, vote on or before November 8th and every other election. Because in the end, if we want judges who will protect all and not just some of our rights, then we've got to elect officials committed to doing the same. This is a major play to try and save themselves from the red wave coming in November 2020. I get it. This is the play they've got to make. I'm going to add, because this is a segment being done live, I don't normally do them live. Smash the like button, share this video wherever you can, share it with your friends or whatever. I'm going to read super chats. So if you haven't already, send in your super chats. I will be reading super chats in about maybe 10 or 15 minutes. This will be a slightly longer segment. I want to get into where I fear we are heading. We have this story from the Post-Millennial. DHS warns Catholic churches to prepare for night of rage. The Department of Homeland Security has shared intelligence with the Catholic Church about a planned night of rage that has been threatened to be unleashed by pro-abortion groups if Roe v. Wade is overturned by the Supreme Court. The document, labeled an urgent memo, was released to all clergy by the Diocese of Stockton, California, and states that a DHS agent informed that an extremist group has been calling for attacks on churches the night that the ruling is released. It is a Friday night. I want to stress this point. I covered riots, conflict, and unrest from 2011 until about 2017 or 18 when I started shifting more into podcasting. And it was because, full disclosure, just I'd become too recognizable and it was impeding my ability to do the work. I can tell you this. When major news breaks on a Friday, that is when riots are at their worst. If the news was released on a Monday, the activists have a hard time, the extremists have a hard time gathering support throughout the week. By Wednesday, the story is old news. By Thursday, people are tired. And by Friday, people want to go party. But riots would still happen. When the news breaks on a Friday, it's fresh. People are screaming. The news cycle is dominated and the riots are worse than ever. Tomorrow, I believe, will be substantially worse, but I legitimately fear very serious acts of terror will be undertaken tonight. So please take care of yourself, be prepared, plan ahead. Please stay safe. Be careful. If you're a church, if you're a pregnancy center, they're going to say at the Post-Millennial, while the threats are not specific, DHS agent Jesse Rangel informed the church that large groups with cells nationwide have already been discovered casing parishes, including those in California. As such, the diocese issued a critical notice for clergy and further instructed them to develop a plan should you see or hear anything suspicious. Make sure you have ushers and or security available during your services and perhaps identify who among you, your volunteers and parishioners, are law enforcement. These threats and intelligence were noted by pro-life activist Lila Rose, who is the founder of Live Action. Or is it Live Action? I think it's Live Action? Live Action? I don't know the context of the word. I'll stress one more time, too. For those that are watching right now, if you super chat, many of you may be disagree with some of my positions and things that I've stated. I'll address as many as I can in the super chat. So get your super chats in. They do help. But most importantly, share this wherever you can. Sharing really, really does help. Rose expressed her concern that the threats represent the most coordinated and aggressive domestic terror in our nation today, all because extremists are angry that they may not get to kill children in the womb on demand without limit. She decries media for not taking these threats more seriously. I do, and I think it's very, very important we point these out. We have this story from the New York Times. As Roe v. Wade has been overturned as of now, 13 states have officially banned abortion. The New York Times, here we go. Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Texas. 13 states have so-called trigger laws, which were passed in a year since the Roe decision. and explicitly note they would outlaw abortion within their borders if the Supreme Court allowed it. In a few states, Kentucky, Louisiana, Oklahoma, South Dakota, the bans would take effect immediately. In other states like Idaho, the ban would go into effect 30 days after the Supreme Court struck down Roe. Other states may require certification from state's attorney general or a legislative council for the ban to become law, a process that could take weeks. All of these states make exceptions to the ban in the life or health of if the woman is in danger, but many do not make exceptions for pregnancies that are a result of rape or incest. 5 states have a pre-Roe abortion ban that could be enforced. Again, that's Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, West Virginia, and Alabama. 5 states have decade-old abortion laws on the books that were invalidated by the Roe decision, but could be brought to life again through enforcement in each state, though enforcement, remains unclear. Okay, so we have a very real threat of terror, of violence, of rioting, and I have to say that I think it's going to get bad tonight. I think it's going to get bad tonight. A lot of people are saying defend churches. You're right. Absolutely defend churches. Stand up, please. We don't want violence, but already we're seeing protests outside of the Supreme Court. Many of these people don't even know what they're arguing for. They don't know exactly what Roe is about. They don't know what their position is, and that's the scariest thing. During my time covering these protests and these riots, there's one thing that we would hear a lot. Protesters would chant, anticapitalista. Yes, the Spanish anti-capitalist chant. And you have to wonder why they were chanting it. Many of the people marching in New York City didn't know what they were even saying. I remember there's one story I often tell where a guy was going, abi, nabida, lido, disto. Gibberish. And so I actually said, I walked up, what are you chanting? And he's like, I'm just chanting. I'm like, what did you say? And he's like, I don't know. They didn't even know they were chanting anti-capitalist. Anti-capitalist. It was just gibberish to them. There's also chants in Spanish like El Pueblo Unido, Jamás será vencido. I'm probably getting that wrong. These people don't even speak Spanish, most of them. Some of them did. But I'm like, do you know what you're saying? They're like, no. And I'm like, you're marching with groups and you don't even know what you're saying. That to me was a worrying wake-up call, but as a reality, I often understood. These people don't know what they're protesting. We are going to see rage, a night of rage, not because of abortion, but because people want rage. It's scary. So, look, we just had this landmark ruling on gun rights. Supreme Court said you have a right to keep and bear arms outside the home, but we did not get nationwide constitutional carry. Kavanaugh reaffirmed a state's right to ban, to require permission. And that means you live in New York, you live in these states, you still can't keep and bear arms. Not until you get permission. Now, 25 states have constitutional carry. Let it be. Let it be known. My prediction here. States that have constitutional carry will see substantially less rioting and damage than those that don't. And I think it's fair to say, cheap shot. It's the blue states that don't have constitutional carry for the most part, and it's the blue states where the blue voters live who are going to go out and burn down their own cities that are blue. It's the funny thing to me. Now in D.C., maybe it's going to get bad. But like New York, Los Angeles, California, we're going to see Democrats riot in Democrat cities where they defend abortion. It's just silly. So I'm just like, okay, whatever. We got armed guards. We have armed security, and we ourselves are armed. I'm not super worried about what's going to happen out in the middle of nowhere. West Virginia is going to be okay. I have zero fear that any one of these whack job leftist terrorists are going to make their way to West Virginia. The churches in West Virginia will probably be okay, but I will say, if you're a church, just please keep your eyes and ears open, work with local law enforcement, be prepared. Now, for the churches that are in urban areas, that's the scary thing, because you're not able to keep and bear arms, and they will likely come after you. The warning has been issued. So please do what you can to protect yourselves. I genuinely mean that. I hope tonight is safe and everyone is safe. I hope there's no violence. But I legitimately believe there will be violence. So here's what I'll do now. Typically As I've stated, I don't do these segments live. Typically, I do these segments for about a half an hour. We got super chats that I don't normally have an opportunity to do here. So let's take your super chats for those that want to get in your comments. I've got this weird thing on my screen. It says, warning, the stream's bitrate is lower than what I need or something. Okay, maybe I'm streaming it. I did not set this thing up to stream properly, so hopefully it's working, I guess. But it's giving me some warning. But I'm going to read your super chats, and I know, look, a lot of people are super chatting things that are unrelated, just a super chat. I appreciate it. I really do want to read potential arguments that people, if you think I'm wrong, or points I may have missed. So I'm going to try and focus on those and statements pertaining to Roe v. Wade and Casey in the Supreme Court. Maple Syrup 3219 says, Clarence Thomas has gone fully based. Yeah, he has. I think Clarence Thomas is a genius. I genuinely do. I think he understands the law. I think he understands it better. And I think he is one of the most fair and clear-minded justices we have. It's remarkable. When you see Sotomayor, I think it was Sotomayor, in the Maine ruling, there was a ruling that in Maine, if you're providing tax dollars to private schooling, you can't discriminate on the basis of religion. And she said, now our separation of church and state is being dissolved. And it's like, there isn't one. That's the opinion of the founders, but nothing codified. There's no legal separation. It's just something we try to do so that we don't discriminate. But the Supreme Court ruling in Maine separated church and state. They basically said the state has no right to discriminate on the basis of religion. But they don't even know the law themselves. Clarence Thomas sees these rulings and he's like, no, this is what the law is and why. Dare I say, Clarence Thomas is the smartest man in government. I'm a big fan. Now, I may be concerned about his statements on Obergefell or Lawrence or whatever. But if the man's correct on the legal issues and the legal precedent, I don't know what else to say. What we need to say then is we need codification through legislation and not through the Supreme Court. That's the defense. Let's read some more. Draft End says the best externality about Roe versus Wade repeal is how many people must realize that government rights were never a thing until the progressives needed to gaslight the whole country. That's right. The government doesn't grant you rights. It protects your existing rights. That's why in the Second Amendment, where it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms, full stop. I don't care about anything else. That is a statement asserting it does exist, period. Disagree with it, amend the Constitution. Outside of the well-regulated militia or otherwise, it literally says the right of the people to keep and bear arms exists. There you go. Let's read some more. Miguel Olvera says, this is a great victory for humankind. Please pray for the justices. They're likely in serious danger. I am legitimately and genuinely worried. Hopefully everybody stays safe. All right. Let's Yellow Fluffy says, whoa, this is a treat like old times. Let's see what we got. A lot of comments. I appreciate the super chats for the support, but I'm going to try and look for statements on SCOTUS. Daft End says, this means the foundation for a right to health care, a right to a living wage and a right to a home, and all these other nonsensical statist power grabs has been broken, and the progressives must start from step one. True facts. Health care cannot be a human right. You cannot mandate someone provide their labor to you. That's called slavery. The state can't force it. Access to health care, sure, I get that. But for the state to give money by taking money from us, no, that makes no sense. This ruling reaffirms this argument that these things are not human rights. You do not have a right to a living wage. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. All right, let's see what we got. People, all right. Matt says, that's for going live. Appreciate it. Raymond G. Stanley Jr. says, time y'all, that's right. We are going to be live at 8 p.m. at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. We're going to have Seamus, who's pro-life, Catholic conservative. It's going to be really interesting to hear his thoughts on these. And I want to stress, make sure you subscribe to timcast.com. Support our work. Really do hope you guys will support us there. Subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to Timcast IRL. because the conversation we're going to have tonight is not just going to be about this ruling. You've heard my thoughts on it. You've heard the news. It's going to be about the active rioting that will likely be taking place tonight as we are live. I hope not, but I'm just being a realist. You know what I mean? Tonight, the IRL headline will likely be riots over Roe v. Wade, and we'll be discussing these things in real time, showing what we can. I hope there's no riots, and I hope we just have an expanded conversation. I genuinely and literally mean that. I hope that tonight people wave signs, they yell, and they go home. But the night of rage is here. Sparky Wires, thanks for the super chat. I really do appreciate it. Orville Redenpiller says gay marriage being banned after this is a slippery slope. You see, this is the point I was making about there's just degrees. Slippery slope, you don't need to say it. When Roe v. Wade is overturned, the next argument in line will be Oberfell. And otherwise, it's a fact. Tracy M. says the federal government does not belong in marriage decisions. It should be up to individual states. It's interesting because I don't see the argument against it. States are the ones who pass the laws. You know, I was talking to someone about why isn't, there's no federal murder law. The federal government doesn't have jurisdiction over these issues. The states do, in which case it extends to basically everything else. And then likely we could theoretically go back to a pre-Loving v. Virginia, which I don't want to see. Now, I think we're well beyond those times. I don't think miscegenation laws will ever come back. Culture changed. But I think it's possible those same arguments would reach that interracial marriage decisions. So I'll stand corrected. I'll put it this way. I don't think it goes there because our culture is just well beyond this. Even Oberfell, I was called up a lawyer and they told me, look, it's fragile, Oberfell. But to get the Supreme Court justices on board in that direction, man, you're dipping far, far back. I'm not sure, but Roe v. Wade was. The issue is Oberfell is not really culturally challenged as much. Roe v. Wade has never settled. The pro-choice and pro-life have always fought this. Oberfell, even Donald Trump came out and unfurled a rainbow flag. But we'll see. Michael Lopez says civil war would break my heart, but fascist dictatorship would break my spirit. I hope there's a third option, maybe if Trump does things right this time. Yeah, man. Mark Shapcott says 60 million Americans, Tim. Imagine how strong the U.S. would be today. How many of those babies would have had children since Roe? The U.S. would be a superpower. Roe was the fall of the American empire. Yeah, my friends, but I also want to point out, I don't like the political argument there because the people who would have been born to liberal parents. Conservatives are not likely to have abortions and they're more likely to have kids. Liberals and progressives are more likely to abort, less likely to have kids for those reasons. GN says Obama inciting violence. Create a select committee. Yeah, man. Yep. All right, let's scroll down. Bro Cody says liberals need to calm down. We're not coming for their abortions. We just want common sense abortion control. I get it. Punk's Not Dead says, saw your billboard off I-88 today and got a bad picture of it. If you want it, keep up the good work. Really do appreciate it. Katie says, are you going to do a segment on the Senate passing the gun control bill or just do a segment here? This is tough. Let me level with you guys. I did a segment this morning. It was very serious, and the viewership just tanks to zero because Roe v. Wade was overturned. One of the most significant historical moments of our lifetimes. So instead of doing my Timcast segment at 4 p.m., I did a live stream now because this is the biggest issue. I don't know if it will be the best plan in terms of timing for making posts or anything like that, but I think this is it for my morning show. I'll put this up as the podcast with the questions and everything. I don't think I'll have any more segments for the Tim Pool Daily Show, which is a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and we'll just get ready for our Timcast IRL live stream at 8 p.m. tonight. So stay tuned for that. But during IRL, we'll talk about gun control because it seems like the House is going to codify the gun control bill, and I'm livid. I'm really pissed off about it. Really pissed off. All right. Jay Gez says, it's a shame that such a morally gray issue is being treated as the simplest black and white issue by both sides. It is tough. It really, really is. We've had many conservatives who fall in the traditional pro-choice camp, but are finding themselves against the left because the left is just pro-abortion. I with all my heart oppose abortion at beyond viability. And I think there need to be restrictions. And I look at Europe, 12 weeks is typically where they end it. I am not a fan of abortion in any capacity. I am not a fan of abortion at 1 week, period. However, I have libertarian qualms. I have questions that are deep moral questions about government's ability to make certain mandates about a person, giving their body to somebody else. The viability question is that if the baby can live, you shouldn't be able to just kill it. If the baby can't live, there's a question about how we handle this. And I got to be honest, I am not the arbiter of morality, and I often don't have strong moral positions on these things because I just don't know. I really don't know. I really don't, man. I try, but I am not a priest. I am not a philosopher. I am not a genius. I am just a dude who reads the news and tries to understand the facts as presented, and I want to hear the arguments. I typically fall in the pro-choice camp, which is within a certain period, it's at the woman's discretion because it is a very difficult question to answer. But at viability, I have very serious questions about it. So, as long as the left wants to advocate for abortion up to 9 months, they will not have my vote. And if that means I end up voting for the pro-life, banning abortions, that's what you're going to get. And it's like, the crazy thing is, we had the progressive on Timcast IRL say to me, he's like, you're siding with the pro-life. You want to ban abortion. And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't want to ban abortion at all. I don't know how I feel about Roe v. Wade being overturned from a state's issue. I get it. But I will tell you this. The left came out and they started championing abortion. That freaked me out. The left came out praising it. No, I was always told, and I always believed, it's a bad thing. But sometimes there are questions beyond our, there are deep moral and ethical questions that we have difficulty answering. Safe, legal, and rare. Safe, doctors should be able to perform it. They shouldn't worry about their harm. There should be safe procedures for the women. Legal, meaning the government should not be intervening in certain circumstances. And rare, it should not be happening. It should be in limited circumstances. Limited, very limited. The idea that the left would come out and say that a woman can abort a baby that could survive on its own is outright just saying, kill it. No dice. I will never stand with that. So if I'm looking at Seamus Coughlin and he says we should ban it outright nationwide, I'll be like, well, okay. And then we're looking at someone on the pro-left side, on the pro-abortion side saying we should be able to kill it whenever we want. I'm like, Seamus, I'm going to sign your paperwork. Because the idea that a baby could live and then you would justify the woman's choice when you could deliver the baby. The Democrats tried codifying a bill that would allow the termination of the life at any point if the woman was in danger. My question was simply to the progressives, if the woman's life is in danger and the baby is viable, meaning it can live, why not just deliver the baby? I don't think that's a trick question. I think it's a legitimate and simple question. There is one thing I didn't pull up that I should pull up, and it's that Mike Pence praises Supreme Court's abortion decision saying life won, and goes on to say, let me read this. He says, by overturning Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court of the United States has given the American people a new beginning for life, and I commend the justices for the decision. By returning the question of abortion to the states and to the people, the Supreme Court has righted a historic wrong and reaffirmed the right of the American people to govern themselves at the state level in a manner consistent with their values and aspirations. Pence also called on abortion opponents to continue their work to ban abortion access in all states. Having been given the second chance at life, we must not rest and must not relent until the sanctity of life is restored to the center of American law in every state, calling for nationwide. But at the state level, that's huge, man. Some people say, I see the comments, Tim Pool fence sitter, you betcha. And it's because I don't think I'm smarter than you. I don't think I'm better than you. And I don't think I can decide for you. I just don't know. I don't know. I do not want to be a judge. I do not want to be a politician. I do not want to be a priest. I do not want to be an arbiter of morality. Some things I think are true based on the Constitution. My position on guns changed not because I had an epiphany that I want guns. I did not go out, shoot guns and be like, this is fun. My position changed because people made the point. Tim, we have rules in this country, the Constitution. We all agreed to them when this country was founded. Not everyone did, but that's too bad. The Constitution prescribes what the government can and can't do. And then I said, you're right. I don't have the right to unilaterally and arbitrarily change the rules in the Constitution. Personally, I don't think people should have nuclear weapons. I think that's scary. But as Clarence Thomas said, 2A defends your rights to all arms, not just the ones that existed in the 18th century. Now, I don't know if they went on to actually say you get nukes, but my position is simply, I do not have the right to supersede your rights. So when it comes to abortion, I typically fall in a weak moral position because I don't know. I don't know. When the left comes out and says you can kill a baby if the mom's sick, I'm just like, what? That makes no sense. And then they lie. I think it was, what was her name? Kathy Tran in Virginia, who said there's no restrictions up to the point of birth. It's Colorado, no restriction on abortion. 9 months, baby's about to be born and they kill it. Sorry, I'm not playing that game. They come out and tell me, hey, Tim, that's exceedingly rare. That doesn't happen. Don't know, don't care. It's rare. It doesn't happen. That's insane. Just because you think it doesn't happen, and that may be correct, doesn't mean you should make it legal. Let's read some more. And maybe I'll keep this going for another 15 minutes or so. Heavy Duty says, I live here outside of Los Angeles, and I'm not sure if the violence will reach over here, but if anyone is here in the country of LA, contact me to set up a protection group for our churches. Guys, I want to say this. Protect your churches, please. Your pregnancy centers, protect them. I don't care if you're pro-life, pro-choice, whatever. Please, no violence. If you are protecting your churches, please get legitimate security training. Talk to your law enforcement. Here's what we don't want to see. If you have a church and you have armed guards in your church, please make sure they are trained to the best of their abilities. The last thing we want are far left lunatics romping around, banging on doors, and getting shot. If a psychotic leftist tries to attack, defend yourself with every legal option available to you. But my point is, it will be bad for everyone if anyone loses their lives, left or otherwise. You don't want it. We don't want it. We don't want it. But I'll tell you what, if they come a knocking with fire bombs and weapons and they seek to end life, I fully expect and respect anybody who would seek to defend